So, last literacy lesson, I introduced the concept of Bloom's taxonomy of lower and higher order thinking skills. From a research point of view, we know that classroom teachers seldom get beyond the lower order thinking skills. In fact, most teachers find it very easy to ask knowledge and comprehension questions. They don't even get to the application questions. To review, we're talking about what makes us the guide on the side and how do we help our students learn. To review, most knowledge is acquired by kids despite all the things we do in the classroom through processing experiences. Knowledge is constructivist. Kids make their own learning from what they do. So we're talking about how we use reading to advance literacy skills. That's the whole purpose. That's the focus of all of our lessons. When I was in the classroom in Toronto teaching teachers in training, I would read a book called Ferdinand. The book Ferdinand deals with a bull, a young bull who sits in the field every day and smells the flowers instead of butting heads with all the other young bulls that he's in the pen with, getting ready to go to the bullpen in Spain. What happens in the story, and I'm condensing this because it's very difficult to read a whole story, at least for now, and then do the teaching using a video. I haven't got that far technologically. But what happens is that Ferdinand gets picked to go to the bullfights in Madrid because a bee stings him on his butt and he gets crazy. And so the people who are looking for bulls think that he's going to be great in the bullpen. But when he gets into the bullpen, he sits down and he smells the flowers in the hats of all the women in the stands. And then he goes back to the field, and the moral of the story is that everybody's different. Ferdinand was different because he wasn't interested in fighting. He was interested in smelling and enjoying the environment. So when I read the story about Ferdinand, my goal was to help my students understand how you can use a book like Ferdinand to go from the lower order thinking skills to the higher order thinking skills. So let's talk about that. When we read the book, we talked about, first of all, the lowest order thinking skill, which is knowledge. So we talked about bulls and the bullpen and Spain and what the bullpen is all about. The bullpen is all about. And what is a bullfight? And what does the word ole mean? And why is the red flag supposed to enrage the bull? All of those knowledge questions that help them understand what's going on in the story. Then we went to comprehension, and we talked about how you ask students whether they understand what's going on in the story. Why did Ferdinand sit in the field and smell the flowers? Why was Ferdinand's mother so upset? Why did Ferdinand get picked to go to the bullpen? Why were they so disappointed in what Ferdinand did? Those are comprehension questions. Understanding what takes place in the story and why it takes place. The next question, the next of the lower order thinking skills, is application. The story of Ferdinand is all about differences and how different people are different one from the other, and what you do with how you deal with differences. So in terms of the lower order thinking skills, we try to help the students think about how the bull in the bullpen and smelling the flowers reflects the differences among students in the classroom. Have you ever met somebody in your classroom who doesn't march to the same drummer? In fact, I often use that expression, marching to the same drummer. And we talk about how the children listening to the story, how the storyline reverberates in their head about differences. And the mothers protecting the children because they're different. Now we turn to the higher order thinking skills. The higher order thinking skills to begin with are analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So the first is analysis. What actually is happening? Can you review for us the storyline? What happens first? What happens second? What happens third? What happens fourth? Why does this happen? Why did Ferdinand get picked to go to Madrid? Why did he disappointed the people who picked him? Why was Ferdinand happiest sitting in the field smelling the roses? That's analysis, picking apart the story so that you can understand it. When I was a student in high school, we did a Shakespeare play every year, and analysis was what we ended up spending a lot of time with, looking at the plot and the role each of the characters in the play contributed. What did they contribute to the storyline and so forth? Synthesis means to take everything back together again, to look at the whole and to compare what happens with what might have happened. So you look at the synthesis and you look at all of the various elements, the bullfight, the toreador, the public in the stands, the mother of Ferdinand and Ferdinand himself, and so on. The most important of the higher order thinking skills, though, is evaluation. Asking the students whether or not the story ended the way they think it should have. How else could the story end? And why would you change the ending? What do you think would make the story better? How do you think the story would be better by changing the ending? Because then you're getting the students to get inside the mind of the writer of the story. That forces the mind to process all of those ideas. That's why it's called deep learning. We only cause students to to deep learn concepts when they have to challenge what's going on and look at it from a variety of different angles. When we were young, we planted seeds in the classroom and we watched the way they sprouted and then the way the leaves tilted towards the sun. To ask higher order thinking skills is to ask the students, why did the leaves move around? Do other things you know of move around to take in the sun? Where else could you put that plant so that the leaves would change? Evaluation forces us to get the students to think about all of the various elements and put it together. That forces them to take their concepts and put them in that zone of proximal development and take it from one level to the next. That's where deep learning functions. And that's what we need to happen so that learning can progress. If there is no deep learning, if there is no processing of concepts and thoughts and ideas, then there is no further progress. We need to get students to think about what they're experiencing so that they can then take those thoughts and process those experiences and then take it to the next level. Next session, we'll talk about how we get students to communicate their deep learning.